Welcome in to another episode of my Dynasty Fantasy Football YouTube. Today, I've got my 5 takeaways series. I'll be dropping this every Monday from now until the end of the NFL season, covering that week's slate. As always, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's go. So, my first takeaway, Drake Maye's debut, and it was very solid. He went 20 of 33 for 243 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions with 5 carries for 38 yards. He did have 7.4 yards per attempt, which is good. He took 4 sacks, and he looked infinitely better and more exciting than Jacoby Brissett did in the same broken offense. So clearly, Maye was an upgrade, and I think he was the whole time. Demario Douglas was Maye's favorite target with 6 catches, 92 yards, and a touchdown on 9 targets. It was Douglas's first career touchdown, which is interesting. No one else on the Patriots had more than 5 targets. Douglas is locked in as the slot wide receiver. Kendrick Bourne, Kayshon Boutte, who actually led the team in snaps, and Jalen Polk, who was not so good, rotated as outside wide receivers. But again, I am very impressed that Drake Maye played well, despite having really one competent weapon in Douglas and otherwise a broken offense. That is really impressive. So Drake Maye gained a lot of dynasty value for me this week. Now let's go into who did not gain dynasty value. My actionable move for this takeaway is to sell low on Jalen Polk. I didn't like anything I heard or saw from Polk this week. Gerard Mayo basically trashed Polk's performance in the media when he said that Polk wasn't one of his top 3 wide receivers. He lost playing time to both Bourne, who's getting healthier, and Boutte, who came out of nowhere, going in the wrong direction from his recent uptick in playing time. Polk has just 10 catches, 78 yards, and a touchdown on 23 targets in 2024. Targets are not great. The production is abysmal. The Patriots have their starting tight end for next year. They have Hunter Henry. They have their slot wide receiver, Demario Douglas. That they have. But nothing else is locked in. They have the most cap space in 2025 of any team and could easily draft a high wide receiver and sign a free agent like T. Higgins, replacing Polk entirely, or what I would call the Jonathan Mingo career trajectory. I'd take any second in 2025 or 2026 for Polk and move on, because it's the opposite of the narrative I talked about over the past few weeks. It's not getting better with the rookie quarterback coming in. It got much worse this week. So Polk is a sell and just re-roll for me while you still can. Takeaway number 2, Evan Engram returned with a vengeance. The Jaguars had so many things go wrong for them in their loss to the Bears, but Engram was not one of them. He caught all 10 of his targets for 102 yards. He led the Jaguars in targets ahead of Gabe Davis, Christian Kirk, and Brian Thomas. Both Thomas and Davis dropped touchdowns in this game, even though Davis had 2 other touchdowns. I don't know how that's possible, but that's what happened. Engram ran 32 routes, just a few less than the wide receiver trio of Davis, Kirk, and Thomas. Engram was subbed out for some running plays in favor of Brenton Strange, but when the Jaguars were throwing, he was out there. He had his regular usage. Engram was not great in week 1 with 1 catch for 5 yards on 4 targets. Now, the truth is probably somewhere between this game and that game. But Engram is a mid-tight end 1 moving forward this year because of the lack of tight ends. In Dynasty, he's a little bit older, so maybe not quite as much, but he's still going to be a relevant Dynasty tight end because he signed an extension through next year. He's cheaper to keep than Christian Kirk. There's a lot more dead cap involved compared to contract with Evan Engram. He's an essential part of their offense. If they're going to move on from one of those 2 weapons because they're underwater on Gabe Davis's contract and Brian Thomas is their first-round rookie, it seems like Engram is more essential to the team right now than Kirk. And, like I said, he just turned 30 years old. It's not old for a tight end. But Evan Engram is probably more of a hold. The actionable move will be to buy Brian Thomas. If there's any discount on Thomas, take it. Every single wide receiver outside of the elite will have a down game here and there. It will happen. Thomas still had 6 targets and led Jaguars wide receivers in snaps and routes run. If he'd caught that touchdown pass, we wouldn't have this buying window. And here's 2 suggestions. You could buy him for both from the Dynasty Daddy trade database. Buy him for Michael Pittman and Gabe Davis. I mean, I would much rather have Brian Thomas there. Or you could buy Brian Thomas for Zay Flowers in a 26 second. I would rather have Brian Thomas there. Despite Zay Flowers' big game, maybe that's a little bit of a sell high on Zay Flowers. I think Brian Thomas of the 2 players is the one with the elite upside. I don't see that from Zay Flowers. My next topic, Sam LaPorta issues. Now, it's great that LaPorta caught a 52-yard touchdown on a flea flicker. That's great, but that was his only target of the entire game. That was it. 1 target. There were so many problems. 1, he lost playing time to both Brock Wright and Parker Hesse, especially in 12 personnel. He was subbed out too much. There was a lot of running plays he wasn't in. He even missed some passing situations, and it's leading to not great production. LaPorta has 13 catches for 199 yards and a touchdown in 5 games so far. And the touchdown and 52 of those yards came on that one big play. 2.6 catches and 39.8 yards a game. Everything is down a bit. Less volume. Just the one touchdown compared to 10 last year. Way fewer targets. LaPorta has fewer targets than Jahmyr Gibbs, 4 more than Khalif Raymond, and 5 more than David Montgomery and Tim Patrick. I mean, even Brock Wright has 9 targets after he only had 14 total last year. So something's wrong. It's something's wrong. It's not just Jameson Williams. Now, in 2023, LaPorta had 86 catches, 889 yards, 10 touchdowns on 120 targets, 5.1 catches, and 52.3 yards a game. Now, the 120 targets is really the wild thing. I mean, LaPorta's basically had his volume cut in half. Some of it is Jameson Williams emerging, but that doesn't explain all of LaPorta's struggles. A player doesn't usually earn 120 targets and then become bad. That is very, very strange, especially for someone who's still just 23 years old. It's very, very bizarre. And I do wonder if that injury in training camp we heard about with Sam LaPorta is limiting him way, way more than we know. That's one of my suspicions. And I'm more likely to say that for a younger player over an older one. An older one, it could be decline, whereas LaPorta, there's no way he's in decline. So I'm a little concerned about the injury. Now, what do you do? Well, at this point, there's no selling LaPorta. He's just 23 years old. It's hard to tell. It's really, really hard to tell. Is this the blip on a radar of a long and successful career, or was last year just an aberration? It's so hard to believe that a 120 target season is an aberration, though. That's very unlikely. So, but it's also hard to believe that we're getting all the way back there either. So it's tough. Here are some deals I saw for Sam LaPorta that I would do. Buy him for Travis Kelce and a 25-second and tight end premium. If you're rebuilding and stuck with Kelce, I get it. I mean, LaPorta is 12 years younger. Kelce is not really a dynasty asset. So I understand doing this one. And then I think this is just frustration. If you could buy Sam LaPorta for Tucker Kraft, I still would do it. I mean, Tucker Kraft is kind of the same problem. We saw him vanish this week. So many passing weapons there. Of the two players, I'm very sure that Sam LaPorta is a better player than Tucker Kraft, at least as a receiver. Tucker Kraft is a great blocker, but Sam LaPorta is a far superior receiver to Tucker Kraft. I don't think that changed. So while I get the frustration, I'd still rather the player with an elite season already on their resume over the one who has not done that yet. So I'd still take Sam LaPorta here, and I really wouldn't be that close for me. If you like my YouTube content, you should sign up for the Patreon. You get my rankings, access to the Discord, and the ability to ask in advance questions for the YouTube videos. Tiers begin at just $6 a month and include all of that. If you want to know more about the Patreon, check out both of my Why You Should Join the Patreon videos on the channel. They're both on the home page. I really appreciate everyone who signed up and any new patrons who joined. I will say this has been by far my most accurate, my most successful, and my best year on the Patreon. And I think a large reason for that is that I'm only doing Q&A or interactive advice for patrons. I'm not doing it on Twitter, and I'm not doing it in the YouTube comments. So I think I've been more focused and more accurate and also just more detailed in my advice this year. So if you want any of that, if you're interested in interacting with me, that's for patrons only. Like I've said on pretty much every video, it will not change. This is not a temporary change. This is a permanent change in approach business model for me. So if you like what I'm doing on here, the content on the Patreon is even better. So I would suggest checking it out. With that said, let's jump into our next takeaway. So our next takeaway is that Will Levis and Calvin Ridley are dynasty disasters. Levis was abysmal, going 16 of 27 for 95 yards, a touchdown and interception, 3.5 yards per attempt. He's not running an NFL offense. He's not an NFL quarterback. Ridley had 0 catches on 8 targets and 1 carry for 9 yards. Some of those targets were not really targets. Ridley has not helped himself either. I mean, I would not say Ridley has been good and it's all Will Levis's fault, but Will Levis has been even more a problem than Calvin Ridley. Levis has managed a 66.4% completion rate this year. That sounds good, but 5.6 yards per attempt, not good. 7 interceptions in 5 games with 3 fumbles, also not good. So he's fumbling. He is throwing interceptions. He's reckless. He's been over 200 yards just once this year, so he's not producing a lot of yards. Levis is not going to be the Titans 2025 starter. That's not going to happen. A benching for Mason Rudolph, I think, is imminent. Imminent benching, I think. Very, very soon. Ridley has 9 catches for 141 yards and touchdown, 27 targets this year. So 33.3% catch rate is wild. I mean, yes, some of that is on Will Levis, but some blame has to go to Calvin Ridley. It cannot all be Will Levis's fault that it's this bad. The 27 targets is nothing special. At the end of the day, Ridley has never returned to his previous production. He's never returned to the 2020 elite production he had, or even the elite volume he had in 2021 before his gambling suspension. Given that Ridley turns 30 in December, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen for Calvin Ridley. So I'm just kind of done with Calvin Ridley in Dynasty. My actionable move is to stash Mason Rudolph. If somehow Rudolph is available in your Dynasty league, he's a must-add. Probably rostered in most leagues, but maybe out there in shallower Superflex formats. I think a benching is imminent. I wouldn't be surprised if it's this week, if not within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Very imminent benching of Will Levis is coming because the Tennessee offense is a joke, and it's going to need to change. Last one. Josh Downs shine with Joe Flacco. It's same game. It's crazy that Flacco looked so much better than Levis, even though Flacco was really bad in this game. Flacco went 22 of 38 for 189 yards, 2 touchdowns, and interception. Flacco's not the point. In fact, the Colts are going to go back to Anthony Richardson. The Colts might have won, but Flacco wasn't that good. The point is that Josh Downs has been crushing it with Flacco. He had 7 catches for 66 yards and a touchdown on 9 targets. He even played a little bit apparently in 12 personnel. Alec Pierce still led the team in snaps. Michael Pittman had the most routes run, but those were the 3 starters basically playing equal time. Only Downs delivered target volume. Downs has 9 or more targets in each of the last 3 games. But Joe Flacco was the quarterback for all or most of the last 3 games. In the one game this year that Downs played with Richardson, he had 3 catches for 22 yards, so he did not produce in that game. Now, what's the actionable takeaway here? There's kind of a few, but my main one is to sell Michael Pittman. So Michael Pittman has just 4.2 catches and 45.5 yards a game, while Downs has 6.8 catches and 59.8 yards a game. I'm not saying that Downs is the wide receiver 1, and Downs' numbers do look better because he missed the first 2 games of the year with Richardson, but this to me is more of a 1A, 1B than anything else. Downs is cheaper, so I'd rather have him than Pittman at his higher cost. Pittman did score in this game, which may help selling him. I'd take a 26 first for Pittman. I'd probably too late to get a 25 first. I think that ship has sailed. And then another deal I saw was sell Michael Pittman for Deontay Johnson and Trey Benson. Probably rather have Johnson over Pittman straight up at this point. Johnson isn't stuck in a bad spot and is just over a year older than Pittman, and Benson is a nice stash as well. Now, there's one piece of NFL news. I don't usually cover injuries, but this is kind of interesting. It's not an injury, a contract extension for David Montgomery. The Lions signed him to a 2-year extension worth $18.25 million with $10.5 million guaranteed. Locks him up through 2027. The exact structure isn't clear. Probably guarantees his 2025 compensation and some of 2026. At the very least, Montgomery's going to be back next year, meaning we're doing this backfield split again for a 3rd straight year. This week, Montgomery had 12 carries for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns with 1 catch for 0 yards, while Jahmyr Gibbs had 12 carries, 63 yards, and 3 catches for 28 yards. The backfield will remain split, and it will not change. Gibbs outsnapped Montgomery in this game and had more routes run. Maybe in a more competitive game script, the PPR value of Gibbs will win out. But as long as Montgomery's there, Gibbs will not be a high-end RB1. That's not going to happen. We're not going back there because there's the risk of a game like this where Monty gets the 2 rushing touchdowns and Gibbs just doesn't get enough work. So it's hard. There's just no highly elite, valuable running back in Dynasty anymore. Jahmyr Gibbs is still one of the top ones, but I'm probably going wide receivers at the start of my Dynasty startups over running backs. Now, I do have a couple of Patreon questions. We're going to go over time to answer them. So let's go. What do we do with Justin Herbert? Feels like he's just a mid-low tier fantasy quarterback at this point. Herbert's very frustrating. He hasn't forgotten how to play football. The Chargers are 3-2, so they're winning. They're at least not doing so bad. But Herbert's just averaging 6.5 yards per attempt and 163 passing yards a game. And he just has 26 total rushing yards in 5 games, which is essentially nothing. So you can't start him for fantasy except as a low-end quarterback too. He's really not a fantasy option. But this isn't like Trevor Lawrence, where Trevor Lawrence on the whole has been bad this year, bad for real life. Whereas Justin Herbert still looks good. He still looks like a franchise quarterback. Herbert's not going anywhere. He's going to be a starting quarterback for many, many years. It's not like that's not going to stop. So if that's not going to stop, then Herbert still has a lot of value in Dynasty Superflex leagues. So overall, in Superflex leagues, I'm still buying Herbert because I think the cost will be low for a locked-in franchise quarterback. In one quarterback leagues, I don't think there's any need to bother with Herbert. There are so many quarterbacks that are available. He's probably still going to be too expensive. So in a one quarterback league, I'm probably just avoiding Herbert. But in Superflex, he might be a good buy low. And then the last question, is it time to start Drake Maye? Well, we're starting and ending the video with Drake Maye, but no, I don't think so. It's probably not time to put Drake Maye in our regular, as in one quarterback fantasy lineups. In Superflex leagues, totally fine with starting him as a quarterback too for the rushing upside. I might rather start Drake Maye next week than Justin Herbert, to give you an example. But one game isn't enough for him to get in the one quarterback starting range, which is top 15, preferably top 10 just yet, because the problem with Drake Maye is you do have the rushing upside, but you do not have passing game weapons. And if you don't have passing game weapons, I'm not sure that the next team to play him, although it is the Jaguars, won't be able to do a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, he won't be in the basement of rankings next week, but I don't think he's going to be in my top 15 next week. Not yet, but we're getting there. We're getting there. I'd like to see more than one game. Now, if you like the video, make sure to drop a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. As always, the best way to support the channel is to subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notifications bell so you can be notified about all my exciting content as it drops. Of course, if you want my best fantasy football advice, available on the Patreon. Patreon.com/fantasy advice. The link is in top right corner. Dynasty starts it, redraft, and more content is on there. And every sign up helps support my independent content, namely this YouTube channel. Well, once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all